On a cold January day in 2005, the quiet town of East Moline, Illinois, was shaken by horrifying news. Adrianne Reynolds, a 16-year-old who had recently moved from Texas, had gone missing. No one could have predicted that this disappearance would become the beginning of one of the most shocking stories in the state's criminal history. Adrianne was an ordinary teenager dreaming of a bright future. She had moved to Illinois to start a new life with her father and stepmother. Full of hope, she enrolled in the Black Hawk College Educational Center to get her GED and fulfill her dream of joining the U.S. Marine Corps. But fate had a very different scenario in store for her. At the center, Adrianne met Sarah Kolb and Corey Gregory. Sarah, a 17-year-old local popular girl, was known for her difficult character and her affiliation with the Juggalo subculture. Corey, her close friend, was also part of this subculture. No one could have foreseen that this meeting would become fatal for all three. From the first days, tension arose between Adrianne and Sarah. The newcomer quickly befriended Corey and Sarah's boyfriend, Sean McKittrick. This provoked Sarah's furious jealousy. She repeatedly threatened to kill Adrianne, but those around her didn't take these threats seriously. No one could imagine how far this enmity would go. January 21st, 2005, became a day that would forever change the lives of all participants in this tragedy. Sarah invited Adrianne to lunch at Taco Bell along with Corey and Sean. What started as a regular teenage outing turned into a nightmare. On the way to the restaurant, a conflict erupted between the girls. In the Taco Bell parking lot, the situation spiraled out of control. Corey held Adrianne while Sarah strangled her with a belt and beat her with a wooden handle. Shocked witnesses later recounted the brutality with which this crime was committed, but the murder was only the beginning of this horrifying case. Sarah and Corey, realizing what they had done, decided to dispose of the body. They took Adrianne to Sarah's grandparents' farm in Aledo, where they attempted to burn the body using gasoline. When this attempt failed, they resorted to an even more shocking step. The teenagers turned to 16-year-old Nathan Gaudet for help. Using his grandfather's handsaw, Nathan dismembered Adrianne's body, separating the head and hands. This scene, worthy of the most horrific horror movie, played out in reality, committed by the hands of teenagers. After this terrifying act, the three killers, as if nothing had happened, went to have lunch at McDonald's. They then disposed of Adrianne's remains, dumping them in Black Hawk State Park. While the criminals were trying to cover their tracks, Adrianne's parents were going crazy with worry. When the girl didn't show up for work at Checkers restaurant, they raised the alarm. A search began that kept the entire town on edge. The police started an investigation, questioning Adrianne's friends and acquaintances. Sarah Kolb coldly lied to investigators, claiming she had last seen Adrianne at McDonald's after an argument. Her calmness and confidence misled the investigators. For 5 days, the town lived in fear and uncertainty. On January 26th, a terrible discovery was made. Adrianne's remains were found. The news that the body had not just been killed but also dismembered shocked the public. Adrianne's parents were devastated. Their worst fears were confirmed in the most horrible way. The investigation quickly led to Sarah Kolb and Corey Gregory. On February 1st, 2005, they were charged with first-degree murder and concealment of a crime. Both teenagers pleaded not guilty, which marked the beginning of a long and emotional trial. The first trial of Sarah Kolb began on October 31st, 2005. The Rock Island County courtroom was packed. Journalists from all over the country had gathered to cover this shocking case. For 2 weeks, the jury listened to witness testimonies, examined evidence, and tried to understand how ordinary teenagers could commit such a monstrous crime. Prosecutor Jeff Terronez painted a picture of a cold and calculating killer. He presented Sarah's diary, where she had written about her intention to kill Adrianne just hours before the crime. Witnesses recounted Sarah's repeated threats against Adrianne. The defense, led by David Hoffman, tried to shift the blame onto Corey Gregory. They claimed that it was he who dealt the fatal blow, and Sarah was merely a frightened witness. After 15 hours of deliberation, the jury could not reach a unanimous decision. One juror, Merck Hurdy from Moline, was the only one who voted for acquittal. the judge was forced to declare a mistrial. This decision shocked the public and the Reynolds family. It seemed that justice was slipping away, but the prosecution was not about to give up. A decision was made for a retrial. The second trial of Sarah Kolb began on February 6, 2006, in Dixon, Illinois. This time, the prosecution was determined to secure a conviction. They presented more compelling evidence, including testimony from Corey Gregory, who had agreed to cooperate with the investigation in exchange for a lighter sentence. His testimony became a key element in the case against Sarah. Corey detailed the events of that fateful day. He described how Sarah had planned the murder, how she strangled Adrianne with a belt while he held the victim. His testimony was so graphic and detailed that some jurors couldn't hold back tears. Sarah's defense tried to discredit Corey's testimony, claiming he was lying to save himself. However, physical evidence, including Adrianne's DNA found in Sarah's car and blood traces on her clothes, supported the prosecution's version. During the trial, Sarah maintained a cold composure. She rarely showed emotion, even when Adrianne's parents testified, talking about their daughter and how her loss had destroyed their lives. This lack of emotion seemed only to strengthen the jury's conviction of her guilt. After a week of intense hearings, the jury retired to deliberate. Unlike the first trial, this time it took them only a few hours to reach a verdict. Sarah Kolb was found guilty on all counts. The sentencing took place several months later. The courtroom was packed. Adrianne's parents, friends, journalists, everyone waited with bated breath. The judge sentenced Sarah Kolb to 53 years in prison, 48 years for murder, and 5 years for concealing the crime. When the sentence was announced, Sarah showed emotion for the first time during the entire process. She broke down in tears, realizing she would spend most of her life behind bars. Her parents, sitting in the courtroom, were shocked by the severity of the sentence. Adrianne's parents expressed satisfaction with the sentence, but noted that nothing would bring their daughter back. "Justice has prevailed, but our pain will never subside," said Joanne Reynolds, Adrianne's stepmother. Corey Gregory's case was handled separately. Given his cooperation with the investigation, he was offered a plea deal. On July 10, 2006, he was sentenced to 45 years in prison, 40 years for murder, and 5 years for concealing the crime. But the story didn't end there. Nathan Godet, the teenager who helped dismember Adrianne's body, also stood trial. Given his age and lesser role in the crime, he was sentenced to 5 years in a juvenile correctional facility. Godet was released on November 11, 2008, having served almost 4 years. It seemed he had been given a second chance in life. However, fate had other plans. On April 16, 2012, Nathan Godet died in a car accident in Indiana. For many, this seemed like an act of karmic retribution. The Adrianne Reynolds case shocked America. It became the subject of numerous television programs and documentaries. Dateline NBC, Deadly Women, E! Investigates, and Snapped all told this tragic story, trying to understand what could have led ordinary teenagers to commit such a horrifying crime. Expert psychologists analyzed the personalities of Sarah Kolb and Corey Gregory, trying to find an explanation for their actions. Many pointed to the role of the juggalo subculture to which the teenagers belonged, and its possible influence on their psyche. Others noted signs of psychopathy in Sarah, her inability to empathize, and lack of remorse. The case also sparked discussions about the education system and the need for closer attention to teenage problems. Many wondered, how could this tragedy have been prevented? Why did no one take Sarah's threats against Adrianne seriously? In prison, Sarah Kolb continued to attract attention. She gave interviews in which she tried to present herself as a victim of circumstances. However, her words did not find sympathy with the public or legal experts. Her appeals for a sentence reduction were consistently rejected. Corey Gregory, on the other hand, showed signs of remorse. In prison, he began participating in educational programs and expressed deep regret for his actions. His behavior in prison was described as exemplary, which gave his lawyers hope for a possible early release in the future. The tragedy left a deep scar on the community of East Moline. The Black Hawk College Educational Center, where Adrianne, Sarah, and Corey had studied, implemented new programs aimed at preventing violence and promoting tolerance among students. The case became a cautionary tale, often discussed in local schools as an example of how quickly conflicts can spiral out of control. Adrianne's parents channeled their grief into activism. They established a foundation in their daughter's name, dedicated to helping troubled teenagers and preventing youth violence. Every year on Adrianne's birthday, they organize events to raise awareness about teen violence and to keep their daughter's memory alive. The Taco Bell parking lot where the murder took place became an unofficial memorial site. For years after the tragedy, people would leave flowers and notes there in memory of Adrianne. The restaurant's management eventually decided to renovate the parking lot, partly in an attempt to erase the dark memories associated with it. The case also had a significant impact on the legal system of Illinois. It sparked debates about trying juveniles as adults in particularly serious crimes. Some argued that the severity of Sarah and Corey's sentences was justified given the brutality of their crime, while others questioned whether such long sentences for teenagers were truly just or effective. The media coverage of the case raised ethical questions as well. Some critics argued that the sensationalized reporting of the crime glamorized violence and potentially inspired copycats. Others defended the extensive coverage, saying it brought important issues of teen violence and mental health to the forefront of public discourse. Years after the trial, the case continued to fascinate and horrify the public. True crime authors wrote books about the murder, analyzing every detail of the investigation and trial. Criminology students studied the case as an example of juvenile delinquency taken to extreme levels. For the families involved, the aftermath of the tragedy continued long after the trial ended. Adrianne's parents struggled with their loss, finding it difficult to move on with their lives. Sarah and Corey's families also became victims in a sense, grappling with the shame and guilt of what their children had done. The case of Adrianne Reynolds serves as a stark reminder of the potential for darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of seemingly ordinary teenage life. It raises uncomfortable questions about jealousy, peer pressure, and the capacity for cruelty in young people. As Sarah Kolb and Corey Gregory continue to serve their sentences, the town of East Moline has slowly begun to heal. But the memory of Adrianne Reynolds and the shocking crime that took her life remain a part of the community's collective consciousness, a tragic chapter in its history that will never be forgotten. The case also sparked discussions about the role of social media and technology in teenage relationships and conflicts. Although social media was not as prevalent in 2005 as it is today, the case highlighted how quickly rumors and threats can spread among young people, potentially escalating conflicts. Psychologists and social workers use the case to emphasize the importance of early intervention in teenage conflicts and the need for better mental health support in schools. They pointed out that many warning signs had been present before the murder, but were either missed or not taken seriously enough. Legal experts continue to debate the case, particularly regarding the sentencing of juvenile offenders. Some argue that the harsh sentences given to Sarah and Corey reflect a punitive approach to justice that doesn't account for the possibility of rehabilitation, especially for young offenders. Others maintain that the severity of the crime justified the sentences. The case of Adrianne Reynolds remains a powerful and cautionary tale, a tragic example of how quickly teenage emotions can spiral into unthinkable violence. It continues to raise important questions about justice, rehabilitation, and the dark potential that can exist within seemingly ordinary lives. As the years pass, the hope is that the lessons learned from this tragedy will help prevent similar incidents in the future, and that Adrianne's memory will continue to inspire efforts to combat violence and promote understanding among young people.